The days of spray and pray are so over. We live in a completely different time, right? It's got to be personalization and customization all the way.
Georgia Watson spent 17 years at IBM, leading sales enablement across 9 countries. This is what she sees from the other side.
68% of them said there was no difference in the way people were showing up, how they were communicating, what their messaging was, what the tech they were offering was. It was all the same. They saw no difference. If you're spamming people, your company, this has an impact on the company brand and how you perceive them, but also on you personally. Are you encouraging people just to spam out and do mass outreach?
So if 68% of your prospects can't tell you apart from your competition, what exactly are you doing different?
Welcome to the Revenue Leaders Podcast. We're back in our sales mini-series, episode 3. And this week we're talking about all things outreach and the mistakes individuals do when leveraging an outreach strategy to build their pipeline and build their business. But we're joined by an absolute go-to-market expert who's been coaching sales leaders, coaching sales professionals globally across all aspects of the sales process. So we're quite honored to have her here joining us today. Welcome to the Revenue Leaders Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invite to be here. It's great to see you both. As you mentioned, I have been working for probably the last decade focused on transforming capabilities, behavior, and culture to help organizations maximize their commercial results. So really excited to be talking about this with you today.
So, we've been thinking about ways, how do we start this conversation? Because there's a lot's changing in the go-to-market space, outbound, even inbound. Everything's becoming harder for sellers, right? But we know that in order for businesses and individuals to hit their target, outreach is still a number one way to do that, right?
Yeah.
Given that the role that you've played for such a long time, you've been on the receiving end of a lot of individuals trying to get time in your calendar. I'd love to know, and just get straight into it, with all the outreach that you've received, what triggered you to stop, open, and actually decide, I'm going to respond to this versus ignore, delete the rest?
Yeah, look, the days of spray and pray are so over. We live in a completely different time, right? It's got to be personalization and customization all the way. And if you're not doing that with the AI tools that we now have available, there's basically no excuses. So when I think about things that would prompt me to take action, it's when it's personalized, it's customized, it's something I'm worried about, it's something that's keeping me awake at night. Or it comes from someone I know, have a relationship with and respect, right? Like, oh, this person must bring something good. Yeah. They always have good stuff to share. So what I think is so, so key is showing up. It's got to be personalized, right? As I said, there's no excuse. But it has to bring some kind of insight or some kind of value as well.
Yeah.
And this is something I've been really focused on with sellers across ANZ lately. How can they show up in a differentiated way? Yeah. And I want to share some stats with you because these are kind of astounding, right? So research was done by Rain Group and sales leaders were surveyed, and 70% of them said their number one priority for their sellers was for them to be able to articulate value effectively. And buyers, 90% of them said they would meet earlier in the sales cycle if a salesperson shows up and is delivering value.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it? And you think about that in terms of, so I still get a lot of the spray and pray now, and I actually have a subfolder in my mailbox that puts them there, and every day I open up that 150 unread emails and I go delete. I don't even look at them now because I know that I'm part of a sequence. So then I guess to that, how do you then encourage everyone to kind of take that first step in being like, you know what, enough's enough. I'm not going to partake in that sort of behavior anymore.
Yeah, this is so important, right? So your inbox is full of all this stuff you're never going to open. And in research from CSO Insights, of those same buyers who said they would meet earlier, 68% of them said there was no difference in the way people were showing up.
Yeah.
How they were communicating, what their messaging was, probably what the tech they were offering was. It was all the same. They saw no difference. So people, if you're trying to sell, you've got to show up in a way that is differentiated. it's got to be different from how everyone else is doing it. Is it in the medium that you're doing it? Maybe it's a voice message. Maybe it's a video. Maybe you get to know the person on LinkedIn or somewhere else first.
Yeah.
Or your message has to be so compelling. And there are research, science-backed ways to help structure and articulate value in a way that does capture attention.
Yeah.
And that's what people really need to focus in on.
And I think that goes to the second point that you were talking about there is like the bucket where, it's someone that you know and trust. Like how does, I guess for you would probably see this as well. How do you, if I was trying to sell to you, how would I then be able to show up over time to get to know you or you to get to know me and my values for then you to take that? Like what does that look like? Is it mostly on social media? Is it email? Like how do you kind of experience that?
LinkedIn is huge for me. Like I think we're all converts. Like the power of LinkedIn and what that can be done for sales is huge in terms of you getting to know someone and for also you sharing what value you can bring, right? If you are showing up on LinkedIn, you are sharing insights that are relevant to your target audience. That person may not be commenting and messaging you saying, hey, I want to put in an order, but they could be following you and understanding the kind of value that you can deliver.
Yeah.
It shows your expertise, your level of seriousness, what it is that you can actually bring. So as salespeople, I think that is so huge to be able to do that and specific to the audience who you're trying to target.
I find this topic really interesting, right? Because we talk about showing up in a way that's meaningful, there's value, and you spoke about the importance of engaging with them on LinkedIn to understand them and personalization. Because this is, for me, this is what the whole topic brings us back to, right? Like we have such incredible tools. I don't need to go in cold anymore. I can reference something that I believe is relevant to you based on everything that I'm reading. And if you're not showing up on LinkedIn, if my prospect's not active, I can still do a level of research about the organization to give me a point of view.
Yep.
I just want to understand again from your perspective, what does good personalization look like?
This is great.
Yeah.
It's such a great question. And there's kind of different levels, right, to everything and how personalized you want to be. But if you think of, my background is particularly in B2B sales and there's a number of key industries that are targeted consistently. How are you personalizing for that industry? This is like basic. If you're not personalizing at an individual level or a job role level, which I would recommend you do, but at least at like an industry level, what are the things that are keeping that person up at night in similar roles in that industry that you can lead with and show up with and deliver something of value to them and demonstrate that you get what's going on in their world, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, like as a part of GT, and I think I've referenced this before, like we did research with CFOs and basically they all came back, know my role, know my industry, know my business. And CFOs or not, I think that any person on the receiving end should have that as their baseline if you're a buyer. But then, and we've spoken about this, how like time is the most important thing in like, you want to show up for that person and earn the right for their time. That's the minimum work that you should do before even trying to outreach to them, because I think that superficial, like we don't have time anymore. So, you have to be quite selective both as a buyer, but then like you said, it's probably sheer laziness if you don't, tend to put the work in early.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that level of personalization and obviously getting emails or depending on the channel, are you okay or have you been okay with seeing one, not responding, seeing the second email, third email? Like, because a lot of individuals that I've coached across a variety of sectors, right? And I think back to now spending a lot of time with partners in the professional services space. One of the biggest challenges or the objections that I need to help them overcome is the whole, I don't want to come across like pushy. I'd love to get your perspective on the type of outreach that you've received and being third or fourth email where you've responded where you haven't felt they were pushing a message or pushing their value prop.
This is a good question. And I think, again, it comes back to this personalization, right? We all have those people on LinkedIn who just spam you stuff that you have is not relevant to you, you're not interested in, there's no value in it. And at no point am I going to respond to that person. I'll disconnect with them or block them, right? But if someone is showing up with multiple touches, but each one like, oh, that's a bit interesting. Oh, hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
It can keep going. And I think there's some data that shows it's up to like 7 touches sometimes before someone takes action.
Yeah.
So I think, it feels like, oh, I'm being too pushy. But often it's needed. And if you're doing that in the right way and a positive way, it can still help build that kind of credibility.
Yeah.
And maybe then they decide, I'm going to work with you. So, for example, there was a technology company who had some software that we were using in enablement, and where I was, we already had something doing that. And they kept messaging me, but it was little tiny short messages with great little tidbits of information. And I kept reading and they said, hey, do you want the report? I'm like, yeah, I want the report. And so then it kind of continued from there. I wasn't going to buy from them because there was something else there. But if in another situation they reached out to me again and that kind of solution was needed, I'm going to be thinking of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if a problem arose in your role, then it would have been like, I'm now going to reach out to that person.
I'm seeing them as the experts.
Yeah,
right?
you are.
They're
Absolutely.
delivering some kind of data and insight and value to me. So I look at them differently. This is the other thing to think about as well. It's like there's kind of a branding piece of this too, right? If you're spamming people or your company, this has an impact on the company brand and how you perceive them, but also on you personally.
Yeah.
Whereas that individual I spoke about, because it was so tailored, I'm like, that's the person I'll call if I need that.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at their company differently too. So I think there's even a whole cultural piece around this as well. As leaders, are you encouraging people just to spam out and do mass outreach? What we know in high-performing teams, they're putting in the work first. They're doing the research and they're customizing. So, maybe they're not going out to 1,000 people, but the 100 who they're going to, it's customized and they're going to have a much higher hit and response rate and success rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it tends to be a little bit slower, would you say? But the outcome in the end, it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare sort of situation.
Yeah.
Really.
No, I kind of reckon, that slow, I actually think it increases velocity because, they're not, again, if it's spamming 1,000, like I've seen, I'm on the receiving end of one at the moment that I'm just getting hammered. I'm on email 5. I'm just watching because at some point we're going to sell to this organization, right? But I'm finding it really interesting that it actually takes a bit of work to build a list of 1,000. Build your list, get the email, pop it in a sequencing tool and turn it on. I know people are that's cutting corners. I much rather the whole sending less concept because I can generate more and it's going to give me better quality conversations. So, and this is where I'd love to pick your brain on, having coached, dozens of people yourself across multiple regions. Would love to understand a moment when you had someone finally get that aha moment. What was the aha that they needed to go through to understand the importance of personalization, structure, follow-up, multi-channel, right? Because that's what makes a really good campaign.
Yeah. There's so much to it, but I think a switch for a lot of people is the whole point of this is to start a conversation.
Yeah.
You want them to come back to you with something. You want to lead with some kind of insight. We know like reciprocity. It's so powerful, right? Last Christmas, I caught up with a friend and we don't normally do gifts. And they showed up with a gift. And I'm like, I've got nothing to give you. You want to give something back.
Yeah.
So when you're showing up with that insight and you're getting value from it, and then they say, hey, could we talk for 10 minutes about this? Yeah, I can make 10 minutes for you. And then it starts that conversation, which is where you've got to get to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where you can come out with all your good questions. You can find out what's really going on for them, listen to what's happening. So I think that shift, as simple as it is, it's like the aim is to get to the conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really, really good point. And then say, like, in your role, you train, you coach, you lead.
Pardon the interruption. I'm Luigi, one of the co-hosts here at Revenue Leaders. You'll notice we don't run sponsors or ads on Revenue Leaders.
This show is free. Our goal is to help you grow revenue and build your sales system that you can rely on. We do have a favour to ask though.
If this episode gives you one clear idea that you can use, do these two things. First, share it with one person, a founder, a revenue leader, or a rep who wants to grow their business. Just one. That's how the show grows.
Second, grab free access to our vault over at coachpilot.com/vault. Inside, you'll get the frameworks, templates, and short courses we use with clients to help them scale pipeline and increase win rates.
So the deal is simple. If you get value, share the episode with one person and go to coachpilot.com/vault to get the tools to put this into action. All right, let's get back to it. You work with exec on what even the KPIs of sales reps and whatnot should have. How do you kind of influence that so it's not just this unachievable numbers game on you got to email blast all of these, we're going for that quality. Like, how do you then influence that on a strategic level to make sure that, it's not reinforcing bad behavior at a team level?
Yeah. This is a really great question. And I think it comes back to this, what's the culture and what's the leadership and what are you incentivizing? So you want to incentivize the right behaviors in a sales team, which means, reaching out to people, making the calls. But if you're saying, well, you have to reach this many, that they're not going to take the time to personalize and customize, ultimately it's going to bring you undone. So I think those kind of KPIs and that understanding has to be of what's really required and what really helps get conversion, or what it is you're selling and within that target audience.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that as an organization, you need to go and figure it out.
Yes. Yeah.
So it sounds pretty fundamental, like city foundational stuff, right? Know who you're targeting, think about what's impacting them, come up with a bit of a point of view as to why you're reaching out.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can, warm them up on LinkedIn, find a bit about them, personalize, and then follow up with a level of intention.
Yeah, exactly. And what we know, it's like the pushing with product does not work, right? Corporate Visions, I've been doing a lot of work with them, and they've got some amazing content and it's all science-backed and really well researched. And they actually did one really large-scale study around what messages really helped move things forward and help people see value. And they looked at 4 different things. So messaging led on products, solutions, insight, and then diagnostic kind of questions.
Yep.
Probably no surprise, but when people were leading with insight and diagnostic questions, they were significantly more successful in their cut through, and they were perceived as adding value and bringing insight.
I love that.
That's so cool.
So do you mind just that's actually really powerful, right? Because I'm a massive fan of that insight. I think there's a couple of books that I read. Challenger was the one that really, I love that book. Keep referencing. People go, it's old, ancient. It's still a great book.
Yeah.
They spoke a lot about, I think some people misinterpreted the concept of Challenger, but I love the concept of leading with insight. What I find when I'm coaching people, they often say, well, I don't have any insight to give, and I have to help them articulate what that insight could look like. But based on the work that you've done with Corporate Visions, can you maybe help us or expand on what does good insight sound like in a message that would trigger the buyer to go, I want to listen to this?
Yeah, this is key. And sometimes it can take some work, right, to get one that's really strong. Other times it's straightforward. So Corporate Visions also have this great structure, right, where for communications, it doesn't matter whether it's cold outreach, a presentation, a conversation, where you lead with a piece of data that is relevant and meaningful. You then link that data to the context of that person and the organization. That's your insight. And you then have a kind of provocative or diagnostic kind of question to then start the conversation.
Yeah.
And if you use that data insight question structure, it just opens the door for a conversation in a different way. And you're leveraging that power of like reciprocity as well. And it gets to those meaningful conversations more quickly. And you don't have to have, 5 different email touches, or maybe all 5 are focused on this, right? But it's a really strong way to kind of reach out with a different and compelling point of view. Like you're not showing up looking and sounding like everyone else.
Yeah.
That 68%, are all the same. You're in the rest who are showing up doing things differently.
I love that structure.
Yeah, but and I'd love to this is a really good conversation. So on the flip side to that, What if you're sending this and thinking, because this comes up for me, am I potentially insulting the person that I'm sending it to by telling them stuff to say, hey, this is what I think, this is my point of view on the data? Am I potentially telling a person that, hey, you're doing something wrong? Because that's just my counter to that. I'm always conscious of how I position that message to not insult, because we're also selling to status and ego, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People buy from people still,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And most decisions are still emotional.
Yeah.
And then people go and get the data and the facts to back it up and say it's logical. So this is so important. But what is really kind of key when you take that, oh God, I've forgotten what I was going to say now. The key point when you're sort of making that outreach is, so at times someone will already know what you're going to, the insight.
Yep.
Like, yeah, I know that already. But the aim is if you can get to them earlier, if you can come with a compelling point of view. When we think about, sometimes people have limited thinking, right? There's a box, there's a way of doing things. But if you can bring some different kind of point of view and perspective and do it before they're aware of it, or before your competitors or someone else draws it to their attention, then it puts you in a different position. And you can't always do it first, and you can't always know. But to your point about kind of insulting them, you're not calling their baby ugly, right? The other way of doing this is a common challenge we see in the industry, or a flaw others in your industry are taking, is XYZ. You're not talking about them. I'm not saying, Luigi, your problem is this. I'm saying, hey, what I see in others who are like you is this challenge.
Yeah.
And when you position it that way, then like, oh, okay, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one who has this problem. So then there's more of a willingness to talk about it, or potentially say, yeah, I've got that problem too.
Yeah.
It's funny, like on that as well. I've also been testing lately there's this problem and this opportunity, so that way people wouldn't get offended. So it's like, this is happening, but also there's a really positive thing that's happening too. And what I'm finding is like, they can take their pick. They can either be like, oh, I need to go down here or go down there. So I still believe that this is a structure, the emotional buyer really matters.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? I mean, part of our playbooks, we build like our personas, and we determine their social style, because what I've found is like selling to, say, a CFO or someone in more of an operational role, they're actually a lot more pragmatic and they're a lot more logical in responding and thinking about the outreach. And I'm not going to offend any sales leaders here, because I'm a sales leader here, right? But I find that, your sales leader, chief revenue officers are often the ones that are sometimes not logical in their response when they're getting this outreach, right? So this is why I asked that question about how do you tailor it a little bit to not get them offside early, because they, the insulting component of, hey, giving data on. So I like the way that you've summarized it to essentially suggest that, hey, this is what we're seeing across many leaders in your space. Not sure if you're experiencing that. I think it's a softer way to get them engaged in the process.
Yeah. And hey, there's got to be an interesting piece of research around that. What is it for a CMO, a CFO, all the different job roles? Like, what is their threshold for that kind of touch, and what do they prefer?
And then I guess like my final question on this, like to wrap up, really, if you were to give, one piece of advice for that spray and pray sort of seller to really turn a corner, what would it be? What's the nuggets there?
It's probably just the reminder that really prospect and customer focused conversations are going to be more engaging, more interesting to your audience, and you are going to get to that meaningful conversation faster. Simple, right?
Simple, but
necessary.
Effective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Georgia, thank you so much again for today. I really appreciate it. And obviously this is a great conversation for us to have in our mini-series. Next up, episode 4 is about conversation frameworks that help close deals. So hopefully everyone can stick around for next week, and we'll see you soon.
And hopefully Dave's not there either.